Good evening, gentlemen. You are welcome to another series in our study of Greek exegesis. Today, we will be looking at one of the major and important aspects in exegesis. This is what is known as the historical, cultural, and contextual analysis. In today's class, we are going to look at how to proceed in this analysis, which is about three aspects: the historical aspect, the cultural aspect, as well as the contextual aspect. All these are important in the analysis of passages of the Bible in the bid to arrive at what we call the authorial intent. As we begin to look at the steps to take in arriving at this analysis, I welcome you to our class today. I am your facilitator, Professor Olubi Adewale. You're welcome. Once again, I say welcome to class. Our topic for today is historical, cultural, and contextual analysis. As I have said earlier, I am Olubi Adewale, your facilitator for this course. Now, our intended outcome for this session is that by the end of this session, you should be able to state the role of historical, cultural, and contextual analysis in interpretation. You should be able to identify the steps to take to determine the general historical, cultural context of any passage of the New Testament. You should be able to tell us the steps to take to determine specific historical, cultural context of a particular book of the New Testament. And you should also be able to discuss the process involved to locate the immediate context of a passage of the New Testament. Now, the background of what we are doing is that the meaning of a text of the Bible cannot be interpreted with any degree of certainty without historical, cultural, and contextual analysis. The aim of this form of analysis is to reconstruct the situation and the needs of the original hearers or readers as accurately as possible. Now, when we talk about historical, cultural, and contextual analysis, we are going to talk about the general historical analysis and the specific historical analysis. Now, in the process of reconstructing this historical analysis, 4 questions must be answered. And these are: what is the general historical milieu of the passage? What is the specific historical cultural context? What is the purpose of the book? And what is the immediate context of the passage? Now, to determine the general historical context of any given book, you have to ascertain the general historical situation facing the writer and his audience and his readers. Now, this will include the political environment, the social environment, the economic environment, and also the religious situation. Now, this will also include details such as their source of livelihood and the threats and concern they are faced with. Now, when you have decided those ones, the next step is to determine the culture-locked words and actions. Now, I'm giving an example here. When Sarah was unable to have a child for a long time, she decided to give a maid to her husband. And remember also that Rachel did the same thing with Jacob. Now, if you look at this action with the eye of 21st century, you will definitely misunderstand and misinterpret what they have done. In order to look at this historical context, you need to consult books like the Dictionary of Biblical Literacy by Murphy, C.K. Barrett, New Testament background, and there's another one that talk about the cultural or historical background to the New Testament. Books on this area, even on Bible geography, Bible history, and Bible culture, are going to be of use at this level. Now, when you have done the general milieu, we are now going to talk about the specific historical cultural context of a book. And in doing that, the following questions has to be answered. Who was the author of the book? What was the author's spiritual background and experience? Who is or are the recipient or recipients of the book? What is or are the peculiar situations of the recipient? And what was the author's intention or purpose of writing the book? Now, information about the author and the recipient can be discovered from what we call the internal and external data. Internal data are the data we could glean from the Bible. External data are the data we could get from extra biblical sources. Now, you also need to study the author's entire history, the books he has written, and because a book and its writer cannot be divorced from one another. Bible dictionaries, Bible commentaries are going to be useful for you in this quest. Now, you also need to identify the audience and their situation. Then, the purpose of writing, which can be determined in 3 ways. 1, you can locate the author's explicit statements concerning his purpose, if there is one. We can take a look at Luke chapter 1, verse 1 to 4, where Luke tells us his reason for writing the Gospel of Luke, and also John chapter 20, 31, where John tells us his reason for writing the Gospel of John. Then another way you can do again is to look for author's repetition of certain phrases, because repetition is always used for emphasis. Now, the second way is to look for the hortatory or parenthetical aspect of the book. A good example is in Jude chapter verses 1 to 3. And also included in this second way is to look at the use of coordinating conjunctions, which can give you clue as to the purpose of writing. You will get this in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 6. And the third way is to locate the author's purpose is to critically examine the points or issues that are emphasized as well as those that are omitted. That is very important too. Now, how do you determine the immediate context of a passage of the scripture? The immediate context is the only antidote to proof texting. And that's very interesting. If the context of a passage is ignored, the statements, the teachings therein are opened to heretical interpretations. Now, the following are the process you can follow in doing this. Pick up the major block of materials and determine how they fit together into a whole. In other words, you can go back into the outline of the book and see how they relate to one another. 2, discover the contribution of the passage, the particular passage you are trying to interpret, to the author's flow of argument by looking at the passage before that passage and the passage after it. Now, determine the perspective of the author in the passage. Is the author talking by himself, or is the author speaking God's voice? This is also important. Now, determine the focus of the passage to separate teachings from incidentals. And this is very important in books like in passages like 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 12. Determine who is being addressed in the passage. This is also important to interpretation. And then distinguish between what we call descriptive passages that just tell us events that has happened, and prescriptive passages that mandate us to do certain things. Example here is the book of Acts, which is full of so many descriptive and prescriptive passages, and also the epistles. Now at this point, I will want you to pick any word in any book of the Bible of your choice and do a kind of a lexical analysis of that word.